Amidst a Montana blizzard's frozen howl, a tiny bobcat kitten, Kiska, was snatched from death's precipice. But her saviors, three devoted German shepherds, offered more than life. They offered a pack, transforming her wild heart. Kiska learned their loyalty, echoed their spirit, a feline soul imprinted with a canine song. When human law decreed she return to the wild, severing this impossible bond, Kiska faced an ultimate trial. Could she forget her unique family? Her answer was a breathtaking 100-mile odyssey across unforgiving land, a defiant journey home against all odds. This is the chronicle of that astonishing return, a testament to a love that shattered boundaries. Now, step into the world of Kiska, the bobcat, who refused to be anything but family. The biting heart of a Montana February clawed at the world. Wind, a malevolent spirit, shrieked through the skeletal arms of the snow-laden lodgepole pines surrounding the Asher homestead. Elias Asher, a man whose life was a testament to the intricate dance of nature, gripped his 13-year-old daughter Clara's mittened hand tighter. Each crunch of their boots on the compressed snow was a small defiance against the storm's escalating fury. They needed to reach the warmth of their log house before the blizzard, already churning the sky into a maelstrom of white, descended in full force. Ahead, three blurs of fur and muscle, Kodiak, the grizzled, wise alpha of their German shepherd pack, Storm, his powerful sable-coated son, and Willow, the youngest. A whirlwind of playful energy carved a path through the deepening drifts. They were more than pets. They were extensions of the Asher family, their instincts finely tuned to the rhythms of the wild land they shared. It was Kodiak who first broke the rhythm of their hurried trek. He stopped dead, a statue carved from loyalty and snow. His great head, ears pricked like twin radar dishes, swiveled towards a gnarled, fallen cottonwood half buried under a fresh shroud. No bark, no growl, just an intense, unwavering focus. Then, with a silent urgency, he bounded towards it, Storm and Willow instantly flanking him, their usual boisterousness quelled by their leader's gravity. "Dad, what is it?" Clara's voice, usually bright, was laced with a sudden childish fear. She pointed to where the dogs were now clustered, Kodiak nudging something gently with his broad nose. Elias's own heart hammered against his ribs, a primitive drumbeat of apprehension. He was a biologist. He knew the myriad dangers these woods could hold, the sudden, brutal realities of survival. He quickened his pace, Clara stumbling slightly beside him. As he drew closer, the scene sharpened. Kodiak, the formidable shepherd, was nudging a pitifully small, tufted creature. A bobcat kitten, barely larger than his own gloved hand, lay almost motionless against the stark white. Its exquisitely patterned fur, designed for camouflage, was grotesquely stained with a dark, frozen crimson. The kitten's breath was a mere whisper of vapor in the frigid air. Its eyes, the cloudy, unfocused blue of extreme youth, blinked with a slow, agonizing pain. Elias sank to his knees, the cold seeping through his insulated trousers. He pulled off his thick gloves, the sudden exposure of his skin to the glacial air a sharp sting, and placed a warm, bare hand on the tiny, shivering body. It was shockingly cold. His gaze swept the surroundings. A faint, almost obliterated trail of blood spots led away from the fallen tree, deeper into the unforgiving forest. Its mother, he thought, a grim certainty settling in. Poached or caught in something. His eyes, trained to read the subtle language of the wild, then caught the metallic glint beneath a nearby snowdrift, the cruel, unmistakable jaws of an illegal leg-hold trap. Rage, cold and sharp, pierced through his professional detachment. As a biologist, Elias lived by a code: observe, document, but rarely interfere. Nature, in its unyielding wisdom, often had its own harsh but necessary corrections. Intervention, however well-intentioned, could upset delicate balances, could do more harm than good. But this was different. The storm was a white-fanged wolf at their heels, temperatures plummeting towards a deadly sub-zero. This kitten, wounded and alone, had no chance. It was a death sentence delivered by human cruelty and nature's indifference. What happened next defied every textbook, every ingrained understanding of predator-prey dynamics Elias possessed. The three shepherds, animals that would normally view a bobcat, even a kitten, as a rival, a threat, showed no aggression. Instead, Kodiak, the powerful alpha, began to lick the kitten's head with surprising gentleness, his large tongue moving in slow, rhythmic strokes. It was a protective, almost maternal gesture, an echo of canine pack care, rarely, if ever, extended to a natural adversary. Storm and Willow pressed in, their bodies forming a tentative, warm barrier against the wind. The decision, if it could even be called that, was made not by logic, but by a confluence of human compassion and inexplicable animal empathy. Elias carefully, tenderly scooped up the tiny, fragile life, tucking it inside his heavy parka against the warmth of his own body. "Let's go, Clara." Quickly. Sarah Asher, Elias's wife, a veterinarian whose pragmatic nature was as renowned as her surgical skill, was, to put it mildly, displeased. The sight of a wild bobcat kitten, a potential carrier of diseases, a creature fundamentally untamable, being brought into their home, into the sanctity of their kitchen, sent a frown etching itself between her brows. "Elias, you know the regulations, you know the risks." "I do, Sarah," he met her gaze, his own reflecting the bleakness of the scene outside. But it was either this or leaving it to freeze. It's badly hypothermic, possibly internal injuries. "Look." He gently revealed the kitten, now nestled in a towel. The veterinarian in Sarah instantly superseded the concerned wife. Her frown softened into an expression of professional focus. "Right. Get the heating pad, Clara, low setting, and my emergency kit from the clinic." Her examination was swift, efficient. Severe hypothermia, yes. Malnourished, undoubtedly. A laceration on its hind leg, likely from the trap, but thankfully not a break. She cleaned the wound, administered subcutaneous fluids for hydration, and a broad-spectrum antibiotic. All the while she murmured reassurances, not just to the kitten, but perhaps to herself as well. "There, there, little one, you're a fighter, aren't you?" After stabilizing its core temperature and providing a diluted milk formula via a syringe, which it took with surprising strength, Sarah placed the kitten in a cardboard box lined with soft old blankets, tucking a carefully wrapped warm water bottle beside it. She set the box in a quiet corner of the kitchen, near the wood-burning stove. "Honestly, Elias," she said, washing her hands, her voice tired, "I don't expect it to make it through the night. It's too far gone." Elias nodded, a knot of sorrow in his chest. He'd done what he could. The rest was up to a strength greater than his. The next morning dawned on a world transformed, buried under a colossal, silent weight of snow. The storm had raged through the night, one of the heaviest snowfalls in Montana's recorded history. Roads would be impassable for days, possibly weeks. Communication lines were down. The Asher farm was an isolated island in a sea of white. But inside the warm kitchen something even more extraordinary than the blizzard had occurred. Clara, ever the early riser, was the first to discover it. A small gasp escaped her lips. Elias and Sarah, drawn by the sound, found her kneeling beside the box. The bobcat kitten had not only survived the night, it was nestled in the center of an improbable living cradle. Kodiak, Storm, and Willow lay in a tight, protective circle around the box. Kodiak, the great alpha, was closest, his massive, furry body pressed against one side, radiating a steady, comforting warmth that had likely made the difference between life and death. He lifted his head as they approached, gave a soft woof, and then rested his muzzle back on his paws, his amber eyes fixed on the tiny creature within. The kitten, incredibly, was more alert. It even attempted a feeble, squeaky mewl when Clara gently stroked its head with one finger. Clara, her eyes shining with a fierce, protective love, declared, "We need to name her, I think, Kiska. It sounds wild and strong, like she'll need to be." And so, Kiska she became. During the enforced isolation of the great snow-in, as the drifts piled higher and the world outside remained a frozen tableau, Kiska didn't just survive. She began, slowly, to thrive. Sarah's veterinary skills were crucial. treating the leg wound, adjusting Kiska's formula, and monitoring her progress. But it was the constant, unwavering presence of the three shepherds that seemed to provide a different kind of medicine. They were her warmth, her security, her unlikely adopted pack. Then the strange and wonderful deviations began. As Kiska grew, gaining strength and a sleekness to her spotted coat, Elias, the meticulous biologist, started to notice behaviors that were anomalous. After about 2 weeks, once Kiska was mobile enough to stumble out of her box, she didn't move with the typical stealthy, fluid grace of a feline. Instead, her tiny body attempted to mimic the confident, powerful gait of the shepherds. When Kodiak sat, a regal sentinel surveying his domain, the kitchen, Kiska would plop down beside his massive paw, attempting to mirror his upright posture, her small head held high, ears swiveling in imitation. Elias began documenting these observations in a dedicated journal, his scientific curiosity warring with a sense of profound wonder. "Entry 14, he'd murmur into his voice recorder late at night, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of his sleeping family. Kiska attempted to play bow with Willow today, anatomically incongruous, yet the intent was unmistakable. She initiated a chase, but her ambush instincts led to her pouncing from behind the woodpile rather than the open pursuit typical of canids, a fascinating blend. Each day, Kiska seemed to absorb more canine behaviors, filtered through her own bobcat essence. She would come, albeit with a cat's discerning hesitation, when Clara called her name, an exceedingly rare trait in wild felids. She played chase with Willow, though her pounces were more vertically explosive. She learned to tug on a knotted rope toy, a game Kodiak patiently indulged her in, his gentle growls a stark contrast to Kiska's strange, breathy vocalizations. A sound caught somewhere between a feline hiss and a canine growl, a unique vocal signature. She even attempted to bark when the other dogs alerted to a deer near the fence line, producing a comical series of cough-like chirps. Sarah, watching these interactions, would shake her head, a smile playing on her lips. "I've never seen anything like it, Elias. It's like she doesn't know she's a bobcat, or rather, she knows, but she's decided being a dog is more interesting." 4 months blurred into a tapestry of melting snow, budding aspen leaves, and Kiska's astonishing development. She was now a healthy young bobcat, her spots more defined, her build lean and muscular, a miniature powerhouse of wild grace. Yet her behavioral repertoire remained an extraordinary amalgamation. She woke with the dogs, ate her specialized carnivore diet alongside them as they crunched their kibble, and, most remarkably, had begun to patrol the farm boundaries with Kodiak. The old shepherd would move with deliberate steps, scent marking, observing, and Kiska, a smaller, spotted shadow, would trot alongside him, mimicking his focused intensity, her head held high, her nose twitching. At night, Kiska wouldn't seek a solitary, elevated perch as a typical bobcat would. Instead, she curled up in the dog bed, a warm, furry knot amidst the three shepherds, as if they were, indeed, one indivisible family. She combined her natural bobcat instincts, an extraordinary climbing ability that saw her scale the tallest barn rafters with ease, acute hearing that picked up the scurry of a mouse 100 yards away, and lightning-fast reflexes, with the learned pack behavior and unwavering loyalty of the German shepherds. The result was a creature unique, a paradox of nature and nurture, both wild and tame, both cat and dog. Clara, now a budding videographer with her father's old smartphone, took countless videos of Kiska's antics, Kiska herding chickens, badly, Kiska trying to share a bone with Storm, who looked utterly bewildered, Kiska standing guard by the porch with Kodiak. She posted them on a local community social media page. Kiska the Bob Dog, as some started calling her, quickly became a local phenomenon. As the roads cleared and life returned to a semblance of normality, curious neighbors, then people from nearby towns, began driving out to the Asher farm, hoping to catch a glimpse of the strange, dog-like bobcat they'd heard about. It was inevitable, Elias knew, that officialdom would eventually arrive. Ranger Mark Davies, a stern but fair man from the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department, came to visit, responding to reports of an illegally kept wild bobcat. Davies was a man of the mountains, weathered and experienced. He'd seen his share of unusual animal encounters, but nothing prepared him for Kiska. He watched, initially with deep skepticism, as Clara called, "Kiska!" treat. And the young bobcat trotted out from the barn, not with the wary caution of a wild animal, but with an expectant, almost dog-like eagerness. Kiska sat, albeit with a feline fluidity, and took the offered piece of jerky gently from Clara's fingers. Then, seeing Kodiak approach, Kiska rubbed against his leg, a clear display of affection, before darting off to playfully bat at Willow's wagging tail. The ranger was visibly surprised, his stern expression softening into one of perplexed curiosity. He observed Kiska interacting with the dogs, saw her respond to Elias's quiet commands. "I'll admit," Davies said, scratching his head, "this is unusual, remarkable even. But the law is the law, Mr. Asher. Keeping native wildlife without a permit is illegal in Montana for the animal's safety and for public safety." Elias nodded grimly. "I understand, Ranger. We're biologists, Sarah and I. We never intended for this to happen. It was a rescue, pure and simple. We'll apply for a special wildlife keeping permit immediately." He had already started the paperwork, knowing this day would come. While they waited for the bureaucracy to churn, Kiska continued to develop, her bond with the Ashers and her canine family deepening. She was now partially grown, her spotted markings sharper, her build more powerful, a perfect specimen of Lynx rufus. Yet her behavior remained that odd, captivating mixture of two distinct species, a living testament to the adaptability of life and the power of early imprinting. Elias meticulously documented every nuance, his research files growing thicker. He even began to draft a preliminary paper, hypothesizing about extreme environmental imprinting and interspecies social plasticity. 2 agonizing months later, the official-looking envelope arrived. Elias's hand trembled slightly as he opened it. The application was denied. The Wildlife Conservation Department, citing established policy and the inherent dangers of habituating wild predators, demanded that Kiska be surrendered for reintroduction into a remote wilderness area. "Reintroduction," Elias read aloud, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "They mean releasing her, alone, into an unfamiliar territory. She wouldn't last a week." Clara, who had been anxiously watching, burst into tears. "No, they can't. Kiska doesn't know how to be just a bobcat. She's family." That evening, Clara, with a maturity that belied her 13 years, poured her heartbreak and defiance into a video. She spoke directly to the camera, her voice thick with emotion, Kiska purring, a surprisingly loud rumbling sound for her size, on her lap, Kodiak's head resting protectively nearby. She told Kiska's story, showed clips of her unique behaviors, her bond with the dogs, her gentle nature. She pleaded for a chance for Kiska to stay with her true family. She posted it online. The response was explosive. Fueled by the Kiska the Bob Dog local fame, the video went viral, shared thousands, then hundreds of thousands of times. It was picked up by regional news outlets, then national morning shows. "The Bobcat Who Thinks She's a Dog" became a headline. Public sentiment swelled, a wave of support for the Asher family and their extraordinary feline. Petitions were started. Letters and emails flooded the Wildlife Conservation Department. Under the unprecedented glare of public scrutiny and mounting pressure, the department reluctantly agreed to a compromise. They would send a team of experts, their own director, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, a renowned zoologist, Dr. Alistair Finch, and Ranger Davies, to evaluate Kiska's case in person before making a final irrevocable decision. The day of the evaluation was charged with tension. Dr. Hayes, a formidable woman with a sharp intellect and a no-nonsense demeanor, and Dr. Finch, an older, more academically inclined zoologist, spent hours observing Kiska. They watched her intricate interactions with the dogs, the way she shadowed Kodiak on his patrols, Her playful wrestling matches with Willow, her response to Clara's calls, even her strange hiss-growl-chirp vocalizations. They saw her scale the barn roof with breathtaking agility, then descend to solicit a head scratch from Elias. They reviewed Elias's meticulous notes and Clara's hours of video footage. Dr. Finch, initially deeply skeptical, was seen muttering to himself, adjusting his glasses, and scribbling furiously in his notebook. Ranger Davies, who had witnessed Kiska's progress, offered quiet confirmations of her unusual stability and temperament. "This is a profoundly special case," Director Hayes admitted at the end of the long day, her usual sternness tempered with a visible awe. She looked at Elias and Sarah. "Your documentation is impeccable, Mr. Asher, and the animal's bond with your family, and particularly your dogs, is undeniable. However," her expression firmed, "the law has no specific provisions for bobcats who think they're dogs. She is, genetically and fundamentally, a wild animal, and wild animals belong in their natural environment." Dr. Finch, surprisingly, became Kiska's advocate. "Director Hayes," he interjected, "while I concur with the principle, my observations today suggest that Kiska is so thoroughly imprinted on canid social structures and human interaction that a standard reintroduction would be, in my professional opinion, a death sentence. She lacks the solitary caution, the innate fear of humans, and likely many of the specialized hunting skills honed by a bobcat mother in the wild. She's learned to hunt, yes, but in a domestic, protected context, often cooperatively with your dogs, from what I've seen." Director Hayes listened intently. The public pressure was a factor, of course, but she was also a scientist. The evidence before her was compelling, challenging decades of established wildlife management theory. Instead of a full reintroduction or consigning her to a lifetime in a captive wildlife facility, which I believe would be equally detrimental to her unique psychological state, Dr. Finch proposed, might we consider a middle ground, a monitored release perhaps. And so a compromise was hammered out, a plan that felt like a fresh stab of pain to the Ashers. Kiska would be relocated to a designated wilderness area, a lush valley approximately 100 miles from the Asher farm. Far enough, the department hoped, to discourage a return, but with enough resources for a bobcat to theoretically thrive. She would be fitted with a GPS tracking collar. If she could adapt, hunt, and survive as a wild bobcat, she would be left to her freedom. If, however, the data showed she was failing, or if she approached human settlements, they would reconsider other options, likely a specialized sanctuary. The day of separation arrived with a dreadful, chilling swiftness. Clara cried incessantly, her small shoulders shaking. Sarah, her face a mask of stoic grief, prepared a special, nutrient-rich food packet, enough for 2 weeks, though she knew with a sickening certainty that Kiska needed to learn to hunt wild prey and fast. Elias, his hands trembling, fitted the GPS collar around Kiska's neck, his fingers lingering in her thick, soft fur, one last agonizing time. Kiska, sensing the distress, rubbed against his legs, purring, a sound that now tore at his heart. But the most heartbreaking reaction came from Kodiak, Storm, and Willow. As Kiska was gently coaxed into the transport cage by Ranger Davies, the 3 shepherds erupted. They whined, a high, mournful sound barking frantically, circling the cage, trying to prevent the rangers from taking her. Kodiak, the stoic alpha, stood firm like a granite wall before the door of the department vehicle, his body a desperate barricade. He only moved reluctantly when Elias gave a choked command, his voice hoarse with unshed tears. At the release site, a verdant, sun-dappled valley with a clear stream meandering through it, they opened the cage door. Kiska stepped out cautiously, her nose twitching, sampling the unfamiliar scents of deep wilderness. She looked into the dense forest, a tapestry of green and shadow. Then she turned back, her gaze finding Elias, then Clara. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed she would not leave, that she would turn and try to get back into the vehicle. Then a rustle in the undergrowth, the flick of a squirrel's tail, caught her attention. A flicker, a spark of something ancient and wild, ignited in her golden eyes. Wild instinct, buried but not extinguished, surged. With a speed and fluid grace that was pure bobcat, Kiska dashed towards the sound. In an instant, a flash of spotted fur, she was gone, swallowed by the immensity of the forest. Clara sobbed openly in her parents' arms. The silence Kiska left behind was a deafening void. On the long, somber drive home, the GPS tracking screen on Elias's laptop blinked rhythmically, a tiny green dot showing Kiska moving, cautiously at first, then with more confidence, deeper into the alien wilderness. "She'll be fine," Elias whispered, the words a desperate prayer he wasn't sure he believed. "This is where she belongs, genetically." But when they returned to the farm, the emptiness was a palpable presence. Kodiak, Storm, and Willow refused to enter the house. They sat on the porch, a mournful, silent vigil, their eyes fixed on the distant, hazy ridgeline in the direction Kiska had disappeared. A week crawled by, each hour an eternity. Clara checked the GPS data religiously, her finger tracing Kiska's movements on the digital map. Initially, Kiska seemed to be adapting, or at least surviving. She moved cautiously through the new territory, the GPS track showing her exploring water sources, finding sheltered spots. Elias, analyzing the patterns, noted she was covering ground, but her movements lacked the confident, established roots of a resident bobcat. She was an alien in an alien land. At home, the three shepherds sank into a profound, listless depression. Kodiak, the steadfast leader, barely ate. Willow's playful spark was extinguished. Storm would spend hours sitting on the highest knoll of the farm, a wind-swept outcrop overlooking the valley, his gaze unwavering, fixed on the distant horizon where Kiska had been taken. The farm felt muted, its vibrant heart dulled. On the 10th night after Kiska's release, the GPS data showed a strange, abrupt change. Kiska had stopped moving at a high point on a rocky hillside. She remained there for nearly 24 hours, the GPS signal indicating only minimal shifts in position. Elias's anxiety spiked. Was she injured? Sick? Trapped? He contacted Ranger Davies, who promised to send a local warden to check the area if Kiska didn't move by the next day. But then, at sunset on the 11th day, the green dot on the screen began to move. And it moved with a new, undeniable purpose. Not randomly, not exploring. Kiska was moving steadily, consistently in one direction, southeast, towards home. Day by day, Kiska's movement pattern became chillingly clear. She wasn't wandering. She was navigating. Her journey was slow at times, interrupted by stops Elias presumed were for hunting or resting. But after each pause, she resumed her course, unwavering. Elias, his biologist's mind racing, calculated the distance Kiska had covered, nearly 50 miles in those first 5 days of her return trek, a remarkable pace for a young bobcat navigating completely unfamiliar, hostile territory. "This can't just be coincidence, Sarah," he said, his voice hushed with disbelief as they pored over the data late one night, the dogs lying restlessly at their feet. "Look at this trajectory. It's a direct line. Allowing for terrain, of course. She's finding her way home." The GPS data painted a vivid, terrifying picture of the challenges Kiska faced. On the 6th day of her journey, her path led her to the wide, roiling waters of the Arrowwood River, swollen and treacherous with late spring meltwater. A normal bobcat, Elias knew, would avoid deep, fast-flowing water at almost any cost, especially alone. The GPS showed Kiska pacing the riverbank for hours, moving upstream, then downstream. Elias imagined her distress, her fear. Then the signal showed her moving directly across. She had found a narrower, slightly calmer point, and, likely drawing on some deeply imprinted memory of playing with the water-loving shepherds in the farm's creek, she had swum. Elias felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. On day 7, Kiska encountered a major highway, a ribbon of relentless, roaring steel and rubber. The GPS showed her hiding in dense brush near the roadside for nearly 3 agonizing hours, the signal stationary. Elias and Clara watched the screen, breathless. Then, in a tiny blip, the signal jumped. She had darted across in a fleeting gap between speeding traffic, a desperate gamble. Each obstacle Kiska overcame, rivers, highways, sprawling human ranches, even, Elias suspected from her detours, the established territories of other hostile bobcats, left the Asher family in a state of stunned, fearful admiration. The scientific literature, the Bible of bobcat behavior as Elias often called it, was unequivocal. Bobcats are territorial, not migratory. They don't undertake such long-distance, directed journeys, especially not a young, inexperienced female through unknown lands, back to a human-occupied dwelling. Then, on the 12th night of her incredible odyssey, the worst happened. The GPS signal vanished. One moment it was there, a steady, comforting blink from an area of large fractured rock formations and dense cedar thickets about 40 miles from the farm. The next, nothing. Just a static map and a signal lost notification. Panic seized Elias. He and Clara, despite Sarah's worried protests about the late hour and treacherous backroads, immediately drove to Kiska's last recorded position. They searched for a full, grueling day, their voices hoarse from calling Kiska's name, their hearts heavy with a growing dread. They scrambled over rocks, pushed through dense thickets, checked every crevice and cave they could find. The only sign of Kiska was a small, heartbreaking discovery, a tiny, frayed piece of the GPS collar's strap, snagged on a low, sharp branch. Elias reconstructed the scenario in his mind. Kiska, agile as she was, must have gotten the collar caught. She would have struggled, panicked, twisted, until the strap thankfully broke, freeing her. But was she injured in the process, frightened off her course, or worse? The next 3 days were an agonizing blur of waiting, of fragile, flickering hope constantly threatened by a suffocating despair. Clara barely left her room, clutching a photograph of Kiska. Sarah, her own worry a palpable force, contacted every ranger station, animal shelter, and veterinary hospital within a 100-mile radius, her voice calm but insistent. Elias pored over topographical maps, trying to predict Kiska's possible route, calculating angles and average speeds. If she maintained her pace and direction before the signal was lost, he theorized, trying to inject a note of optimism he didn't feel. And assuming she isn't badly injured, she could reach the farm boundaries within 2, maybe 3 more days. Her fur, her conditioning, it would protect her from the cold. But she needs food, water, and she has to avoid larger predators, wolves, bears, even stray dogs or hostile humans. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. Kiska's chances of survival, alone and untraceable, diminished with each passing hour. On the 3rd night since losing the signal, the 15th night since Kiska had been taken, the Asher family sat down to a dinner none of them could taste, the silence in the house amplifying their shared grief. Suddenly, Kodiak, who had been lying listlessly by the hearth, shot up as if touched by an electric current. A low growl rumbled in his chest, then erupted into a series of sharp, excited barks. Storm and Willow were instantly on their feet, tails lashing, joining the chorus, scrabbling at the front door. Elias's heart leaped into his throat. He flung the door open, his own pulse thundering in his ears, and there at the edge of the yard, bathed in the ethereal glow of a rising moon, stood a small, slender, unmistakably feline figure. Dirty, considerably thinner, her spotted coat matted and burred, and without the GPS collar, but unmistakably, miraculously, Kiska. She was alive, and she was looking straight at the house. Later, when the initial wave of joyous, tearful chaos subsided, Elias, the ever-present scientist, pieced together Kiska's incredible journey. Based on the partial GPS data, her last known location, and her average speed, he estimated she had traversed at least 100 miles of rugged, varied Montana terrain. She had crossed 2 major rivers, 1 main highway, skirted a human settlement, and successfully navigated or evaded the territories of several other bobcats. And she had done it all in approximately 16 days, a young bobcat barely reaching maturity, driven by something far more powerful than simple instinct. Wildlife experts, consulted later, offered various theories: exceptional geomagnetic navigation abilities, an unusually developed spatial and terrain memory, a freak manifestation of migratory instinct rarely seen in the species. Some even cautiously mentioned the possibility of a deep, almost telepathic bond with her canine family, though they'd never published such a notion. But for the Asher family huddled together on the porch, Kiska now safely nestled amongst the ecstatic, whining, licking shepherds, the only explanation that mattered, the only one that truly resonated, was love. Kiska hadn't returned to a geographical location. She had returned to her family. The moment Kiska saw Kodiak, Storm, and Willow, her entire demeanor had transformed. She didn't approach with the cautious, hesitant steps of a wild bobcat, re-entering a human space. She rushed forward with the joyful, uninhibited sprint of a dog, reuniting with its beloved pack. The three shepherds met her halfway, and all four animals became a tumbling, rolling bundle of joyful yelps, whines, purrs, and wet fur. Clara, sobbing with relief, ran out and knelt beside them, her arms embracing the entire writhing, ecstatic pile. Elias and Sarah followed, tears streaming down their own faces, unable to articulate the enormity of what they were witnessing. Kiska, the wild bobcat, had navigated over 100 miles of unfamiliar, perilous terrain, following an almost unerring line back to the only home, the only family she had ever truly known. They brought her inside. Sarah's immediate examination revealed Kiska had lost significant weight and bore several fresh scratches. A more prominent, slightly infected wound on her front leg was likely where the collar had snagged, evidence of her struggle to break free. But otherwise, considering her ordeal, she was remarkably, astonishingly healthy. She devoured the food Sarah offered, then, utterly exhausted, curled up between Kodiak and Storm, purring like a tiny, contented motor. Elias called Ranger Davies first thing the next morning. The ranger drove out immediately, his face a mask of disbelief as he witnessed Kiska, looking utterly at home, curled up amongst the three sleeping shepherds as if she had never left. This doesn't happen," Davies muttered, shaking his head, his voice filled with a bewildered respect. "Bobcats don't do this. They don't navigate like that, over that kind of distance, just to return to a specific place. And they certainly don't seek out the company, the protection, of another species like this, not in the wild." Clara knelt beside Kiska, gently stroking her soft fur. Kiska blinked her wild golden eyes, then leaned into Clara's touch. "She doesn't think she's just a bobcat, Ranger Davies," Clara said softly. "She thinks she's part of this family. And she is." Davies looked from Kiska to Elias and Sarah, then back to the sleeping animals. I have to report this. You know the department. They'll likely want to take her away again, probably farther this time, to a secure facility. The precedent." But as Martinez looked into Kiska's eyes, wild, yes, but filled with an unmistakable intelligence and a profound, undeniable attachment, he sighed, a long, weary sound. "But I'll also propose another option. No promises, mind you, but there's never ever been a documented case like this. Kiska is something else entirely." 2 weeks later, Director Evelyn Hayes personally returned to the Asher farm. She brought Dr. Finch with her. This time, there was less formal observation and more quiet contemplation. She watched Kiska play-stalking Willow through the tall summer grass, a perfect blend of feline stealth and canine exuberance. She saw Kiska trot alongside Kodiak as he made his evening patrol of the fence line, their movements synchronized, a silent understanding passing between them. She saw Kiska later leap effortlessly to the lowest branch of an old apple tree, survey her domain with the keen eyes of a wild hunter, then descend to rub affectionately against Elias's legs before joining the dogs on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. "What we are witnessing here," Director Hayes said, her voice quiet, thoughtful, "challenges many of our foundational understandings of animal behavior, of imprinting, of interspecies social bonding, and even of what constitutes wildness. Kiska is clearly no longer an ordinary bobcat. But," she added, a faint smile touching her lips, She is most certainly not a simple pet either. She's an anomaly, a beautiful, perplexing anomaly. The final decision came a month later after much internal debate within the department, consultations with independent ethologists, and, Elias suspected, a considerable amount of soul-searching on Director Hayes's part. An entirely new, unprecedented category of permit would be issued to the Asher family, a special custodianship and research permit for an anomalous wildlife case. Kiska was allowed to stay. The conditions were stringent. The Ashers had to construct a large, secure, and enriched outdoor enclosure for Kiska and the dogs, though Kiska would still have supervised access to the house and farm, allowing her space to exhibit her natural behaviors safely. They had to agree to periodic, unannounced inspections. They were required to participate in ongoing, non-invasive research studies conducted by Dr. Finch and his team, contributing to a long-term study on animal behavior, neuroplasticity, and interspecies social dynamics. And they had to participate in select public education programs, sharing Kiska's story responsibly to promote conservation and a deeper understanding of wildlife. Elias and Sarah agreed immediately, their relief immense. Clara jumped for joy, hugging Kodiak, then Storm, then Willow, then rushing to find Kiska, who was napping in a patch of sun, to tell her the news. A year later, the Asher farm had, in a small, controlled way, become an unlikely beacon for learning. Small groups of university students, aspiring zoologists, and researchers would occasionally visit, by appointment, to observe Kiska and her canine brothers in their unique, harmonious existence. Elias had co-authored a groundbreaking scientific paper with Dr. Finch, published in a prestigious journal, detailing the Kiska case, unprecedented interspecies, filial imprinting, and navigational acuity in Lynx rufus. It caused quite a stir in the academic world, sparking debate and inspiring new avenues of research. Clara, now a poised and articulate 14-year-old, had firmly decided on her future. She would become a wildlife biologist and veterinarian, specializing in animal behavior and conservation, her path illuminated by a spotted, golden-eyed muse. And Kiska the bobcat, had fully developed into a magnificent adult, embodying all the wild beauty, power, and grace of her species. Her coat was a thick, luxurious tapestry of creams, tawny browns, and dark spots. Her movements were poetry, her senses preternaturally sharp. But as she sat on a high sun-warmed rock in her spacious enclosure, a favored lookout point, surveying the rolling pastures of the Asher farm with the same vigilant, confident posture as Kodiak, who lay contentedly at the base of the rock, no one who knew her story could deny that she had found exactly where she belonged. Kiska's extraordinary journey from a dying, discarded kitten to a creature of two worlds, a bridge between the wild and the tamed, had proven a simple yet profoundly resonant truth. Sometimes the bonds of love, loyalty, and acceptance can indeed forge a path stronger than the most deeply ingrained natural instinct. And family, in its truest, most expansive sense, is not merely about where you are born or what species you belong to. It is about where you are loved, where you are seen, and where your heart, against all odds, finally finds its echo, its home. Kiska's incredible journey truly redefined the meaning of family, didn't it? What part of her story, her unbreakable bond with the dogs, that phenomenal journey, or her indomitable spirit, touched your heart the most? If Kiska's tale of love and loyalty challenging natural instinct captivated you, please hit that subscribe button. We're passionate about sharing stories that inspire, surprise, and move you. Subscribe and join our community so you don't miss out on other unforgettable journeys. Thanks for watching, or